Okay. So the kind of talk that's coming out at the moment, in particular around aiming high, is that the integrated youth support service, that it's a targeted work is kind of at the heart of that like model and the heart of delivery of kind of bringing together and merging all these kind of disparate services that work with young people right across the board, many of which are often sort of statutory agencies that deal with the kind of social care of young people and their families, and they've also kind of bundled youth work into this whole kind of delivery in wake of the Victoria Columbia and death of baby P. But anyway, at the core of it, they're talking about how the integrated youth support service is going to be this thing for all different kinds of young people. But at the heart of it, it's going to be targeted work. Now, I work for the Youth Inclusion Programme, and for the last 4 or 5 years have been involved in delivering targeted work. And the reason why I got involved in this campaign initially is a concern that all work will go in the direction of targeted work. And I think there's a very limited sort of idea about what youth work is. And there's a saying, if your name's not on the list, you're not getting in. And more, rather than meeting young people on the street with tax work, meeting young people because they pop into the centre, and over a slow period of time, you may get to know a young person. We're more and more working with young people who have already been handed to us on a list. Either they're not working, they're not in training and employment, so we get given a neat list. They're known to the youth offending team, they give us a list. They're known to be potentially involved in violent extremism, they give us another list. And it kind of narrows down so that actually only a sort of small percentage of the actual work that we do is the outcome work. Now, as we know as youth workers, we're often the masters of like subverting the money that we get given by different agencies, and we work with a hell of a lot more young people than on the books. We're actually, getting out, we're being paid for. But it's only a small percentage of the actual work that we do is what we're being, driven by. So the outcomes are how many people, you kind of get off the books and actually into a training and employment, or how many people kind of stop their offending behaviour. And I just think that it's a very sort of shallow and quite limited perspective about what youth work is all about. So I just want to kind of have a list a few kind of concerns about that, and hopefully then allow you to think about something, particular questions for after I've spoken. There's a big emphasis at the moment, and it's nothing new, about driving us all to working into multidisciplinary teams. But what does that mean? Many places in Britain are already implementing integrated working. In Newcastle and North Tyneside, we're only just starting that kind of journey. But we're being told that there's no other option. You have to kind of buy into the system. Now, I work in a voluntary sector organisation, community sector organisation, and in some ways we're slightly out of that. But if you're actually working within the statutory sector, from what I can see in the discussions that I've had with people, it's very much about kind of forming locally based teams and basically forming around 6 or 7 people working on a team. Somebody might be an educational welfare officer, somebody is a young person psychologist, somebody is a youth worker, someone's a social worker. And it's not around working with young people, but working on young people, specifically focusing on like problematic young people. And the amount of resources and money and time that's being spent in terms of training staff up and moving all of the kind of resources, that takes the resources away from universal services. And my concern really is that, where is the room for universal services for young people, and just for the kind of clubs where young people can just turn up, enjoy themselves, and as much as that, and that we're all kind of focused on how we can solve the problems of young people who are considered like not fitting into the social structure of society. Also, I work, as I said, the organisation that I work for, we're not part of that system, but we're being asked to join that system, so we won't be involved in assessing the young people who are deemed most at risk and who need to be kind of worked upon. But we're being told that we have to work with that, and more funding's tied to that. So if we don't choose to opt into that system, that means the money's not on the table for us to do that work. The jobs are lost, the youth work doesn't happen, and we're not able to do some of those generic work with young people. So it feels like we're kind of being forced into a system where basically, as Tony was mentioned before, where you can't like stand against what New Labour's basically saying. You have to kind of go with, this is the kind of preferred idea, this is the preferred way of working. And it kind of limits down this idea of a youth service, which was, you know, kind of something that would be open to all, where it's now kind of driven just by this kind of targeted delivery model. And then anything else on the outside, you know, places for go, places to act, positive activities for young people, is outsourced, you know. So we as an organisation, we are one of those outsourcers. We've recently received quite a lot of money from commissioned services, and we're currently delivering on services around prevention services for young people. But a conversation I had the other day scared the hell out of me, and that was one of the only ways that we currently work with young people who are 16 or over is by basically claiming that we're doing it under the realm of NEET work, i.e. young people who are not mature in education. So young people who've just come into my project who are over 16, and normally we wouldn't have any money on the books to kind of work with them, but because they're not working or whatever, we can claim to be working with them. And I was told that in the next sort of 6 months, that's all going to get commissioned out right across the area where I work, and not just in the sort of few towns, but right across the west end of Newcastle. And what that means is that, like, any organisation can kind of bid for this tender, and it means that, you know, it's not the kind of work that I want to be doing, is trying to help young people into jobs and into trade and employment, although I think, you know, it's definitely something that many of those young people want, is to get a job or whatever. It's that it's now basically taking away the only kind of funding that we can subvert into being like a competition. So I work for an organisation which has like a turnover of about £1 million, which is a huge amount of money for a voluntary sector organisation. But what about all the little small community organisations who are totally like their funding opportunities and the opportunities for them to get money are being narrowed and narrowed and narrowed, and the only money that they can do work with over 16-year-old young people is by subverting money in the first place. But now this is going to be kind of commissioned out. And one organisation, and it will remain nameless, is a private sector company that's come into the area, and what they are doing is they're getting these lists of people who are NEET, and they're going round and knocking on the door of every single person who happens to be on that list and saying, oh, by the way, I heard that you're not in education and employment, is there anything we can be doing? And basically then go back to connections and tell them, all right, well, we've knocked on every single person in this list. It doesn't talk about the quality or what you did with them or the, what actually happened or the process of it. And it's just those kind of stories. I'm sure anybody in this room have got their own examples of that kind of thing happening. But the problem is it goes so far away from what we were originally talking about, and that is kind of the true essence of youth work, about voluntary participation, meeting young people where they want them, meeting young people for the first time, not meeting a young person because you've seen their name already on a list before you've actually met them, and you've already got some idea of what they're actually about or what their behaviour might be like, and prejudging them. About, kind of coming to collective decisions. All of it's kind of focused on individuals and working out and solving their problems, and not working about a kind of a collective solution for working with people. It's not about sort of, there's a lot of emphasis on the words resilience, and I like to sort of put that idea of like the continuum being resilience versus resistance, Well, like in the recent paper Aiming High, they talk a lot about the importance of social activities, positive activities for young people, and those kind of activities are a really good way of young people sort of, having something worthwhile in their life, something that have no problem with, I think it's at the heart of what I do. But it's all about, that it will make them more resilient, that even if they're from a working class background, even if that's all they're ever going to amount to in life, at least they've got this little bit, of resilience in their life so they can take the crap as it's thrown at them. What about kind of trying to help young people to get out of those social circumstances? And in a time that we live in 21st Britain, where people are so depoliticised, even myself, I can see my own depoliticisation happening every single day by the onslaught of everything that comes in around you. What about the young people who are, this is all that they know? And they're not kind of being, there's no discourse about how we can teach them about class, how we can teach them about race, how we can teach them about, the very people that they are, about spirituality, about all of these things. None of that is mentioned in any of this discourse. It's all about, what we need is well-trained people who can give them positive activities, and it doesn't talk about, it's all about the product and the end result, and maybe the idea of having an activity will divert them away, take them away from, getting a go-karting trip and take them away from being Javas on the end of a street corner, which is really what it's all about. Anyway, I'd like to finish off just by Just saying one last thing really is that I was at the Transforming Youth Work Conference, which was a bit of a blag really, and I was asked to speak there, and I did a talk called From the Workers from the Coalface, and talked there, and it was a lot smaller sort of thing because they kind of segmented us up into different groups, and I did a talk there. But basically speaking to the people who were the big wigs at this kind of event, again who will remain nameless, they don't really sound like they've got a clue what they're doing. You know, they're trying to implement lots of policies about integrating services, and the reality is we're fast approaching the election. We all know that after the election there's going to be huge cuts, you know, and either blue or red, you know, there's going to be massive implications for all kinds of welfare services. And all of these organisations that have talked all this rhetoric for the last 5 years about how we're going to transform, and we're going to bring everybody together, and there's going to be total unity, and we're all going to deliver on the same outcomes, you know, are saying exactly the same thing, but when they're asked about how they're going to do it, they're completely speechless. And at points at the time, it was almost embarrassing as you saw the kind of tumbleweed roll over. Well, they say, I'll give you an email and I'll get back to you on that question. That was a really good question. I'll send you an email as well when I know a little bit more. Once I've spoken to this particular minister about the point that you raised, and they really can't mention anything because everybody's sat on budgets that they're not able to spend. So at the same time as we might be feeling a bit, you know, downbeat about it and feeling that there's no future, whatever, and the idea that integrated services will actually bring around a greater bureaucracy and won't allow kind of small directed projects, the idea that people at the top still don't know what they're doing, and there's still kind of a chance for anarchy. So anyway.